I'm Marcus Watson. I'm the host of a podcast called Spiritual Life and Leadership. And we talk about healthy leadership. We talk about inner life formation, spiritual formation for the sake of healthy outer life leadership. And so I had a great conversation with Kevin White, my friend and guest here, who wrote a book not too long ago called Audacious Generosity. And we talked about his story of experiencing loss and the kind of new life that led to. And so anyway, hi, Kevin. How you doing?
Hi, Marcus.
All right.
Hey there. Thank
Good.
you.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, my day's going great. It's good to be with you today.
Good. Well, so I thought we would talk about loss a little bit, just for about 10 minutes or so, or however long this goes, hopefully not much longer than that. Because we had a great conversation about it on the podcast. And here is what I was thinking. So yesterday was a crazy day in the United States. And just in case anyone sees this later, right, this is January 7th that we're recording this. January 6th, people breached the Capitol building, and senators and representatives went into hiding. Anyway, just a crazy day. I got to thinking about Donald Trump, and this is not going to be a political conversation, but I started thinking about the fact, his inability to accept loss, and I started feeling a little bit sad for him, because what's such a strange paradox is that there's actually something that's actually very life-giving about accepting loss, and so. I don't know, Kevin, what do you think about that? Does that resonate with you?
It does. First of all, thank you for having me on your podcast. And it's a powerful episode, not because I am your guest, but because you're doing a great job. And I appreciate your podcast. Huge fan of that. Very honored that you would interview me. But yeah, what timely events yesterday. As our Capitol was breached. It will go down in human history as a very sad day. And our own inward terrorist attack, if you will, to our own selves. This was not a foreign enemy that came against us. This is Americans against Americans.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it seems as if our leader really is having a tough time. The media, I remember back in December saying, we are dealing with someone that is a very sore loser. And I'm with you. I don't want to sit here and talk for 10 minutes picking on Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Let's make this very general, and I'll just be transparent. I have been a loser before. I got fired from a church that I planted.
Yeah.
I was a church planter for 3 years and worked my butt off, bled, sweat, and teared for them. And unfortunately, I deserve to be fired, not because of misappropriation of funds or because of sexual impropriety, but because I was a workaholic maniac for Jesus. I was in bondage to the fear of failure. I was in a performance trap treadmill I could not get off of. And fortunately, they loved me enough to release me. At the time, I didn't see it that way. And I was so angry and so bitter. And I just remember the moment that I had to make a choice. Either I can fight this and, quote, lawyer up, or I can surrender and realize there is a sovereign God in our lives. Yeah. And we've talked about America throwing God out the window, and this could be one of those consequences. I can't judge Donald Trump. I can only say, for me, I would have endured ongoing agony and hell had I not surrendered to the reality that God is God and I am not.
Yeah.
In the midst of that loss.
Yeah. I think, right, that word surrender is so important, right? That is not a word that we like. Certainly not in America, probably not really anywhere in the world. Right? We have sayings like never surrender, right? And I imagine that's what the president has said to himself and to others. We don't surrender, right? We don't concede, never surrender. But there's a need for that. Like, let me just ask you, what do you think when a person, just any person in general, refuses to surrender, right? Because they're to not only God, but the circumstances of life, which are bigger than us, right? What do you, how would you describe what happens to a person when we don't, or when we can't, when we refuse?
They put themselves through unnecessary pressure
Mm,
that you either have to defense up or you have to surrender. And if you refuse to surrender to the sovereignty of God, you have to maintain and provide and defend yourself.
yeah,
It can be an incredible pressure
yeah,
to, to put yourself and others around you through
yeah,
that.
yeah.
You know, the lie is this failure will mark me for the rest of my life. I will
Mm,
never see beyond this failure.
yeah,
I will always be marked with the stamina of being fired. You
right,
know, that
right,
was really a huge threat in my life
yeah,
during the time. I am unusable before God. I'm unworthy to the church, on and
mm-hmm,
on and on. But yet nothing could be further from the truth. Now I'm 2 decades out of that.
yeah,
And I know that God is so much bigger than that place of pain.
yeah,
And you probably read lots of leadership books, but the reality is strong leaders have had a train wreck and
mm,
survived.
yeah,
Every strong leader that we look up to, if you really look through the human history of their lives, they will say, it wasn't until I failed. It
yeah,
wasn't until I went through that train wreck that I really learned what being a real leader is all about.
right, right. Um, right, and strong, not just powerful, mighty, but strong and healthy, right? Strong, healthy leaders that people that bring life to those that they lead, and even to those maybe who they don't lead. You
Right.
know, um, surrender is so important. One of the things, so I've been through a similar experience as you, having been voted out of my church. For me, it was only about coming up on 5 years ago.
Mm.
One of the things I had to tell myself as this whole process was kind of happening, as things were unraveling, was this is not the end of my story, right? This is, and I just would tell myself that this is not the end of my story. This is not the end of my story. This is just a chapter in my story. And the next chapter will be different, hopefully better, right? And it has got, of course, it did. Um, uh, I think that's really helpful to remember as we experience loss in life, right? This is not the end of my story. Um, let me see. Oh, we've got a couple folks here. James, the Bible speaks to you, said failure teaches good lessons, which I completely agree with that, right? There's so much to learn when we fail, right? When we experience loss, when we become what others might call losers.
Yeah.
And I think we become more human. In a way, we become more fully ourselves. We can embrace our true selves when we embrace the loss that we experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think of one more lesson that I've really picked up on the use of the word enemy.
Mm,
And for me, during that time, I thought the people who had voted against me were now my enemies.
yes.
It wasn't until I, a few months later, realized the Bible only really encourages us to view the enemy as the enemy. I mean, Jesus even said, pray for your enemies. And so
Hmm.
you can't really start praying for someone that you hate and maintain that hate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've learned as a pastor and a minister of the gospel, if I start seeing people as
Hmm.
the enemy, I'm disqualifying myself from service.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's true even of our public servants,
Yeah.
um, even the president and our leaders
Right.
above us,
Right.
our government. If they start seeing the people that have voted for them and that they're called to serve, and the same in the church, it's not always political as far as votes and stuff, but if I start seeing people in general as the enemy, I'm losing my ground and my credibility as a minister of the gospel.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
one audience, Almighty God,
That's
and
right.
there's one enemy,
That's right.
the enemy of Jesus. The battle's not really between me and Satan as much as it is between Jesus and Satan,
That's
and
right.
the battle belongs to the Lord. So
Yeah.
we don't have to fight with one another.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Well, that's when we kind of end it there. I think that I'm excited to share the conversation that we had on the podcast, because it's just a really powerful story, and I appreciate your perspective. Right, loss gives us such a different failure, gives us such a different and good perspective on life, on existence, on the world, you know, and increases our compassion, I think, for others when we experience loss and failure. And so anyway, I loved hearing that in your story. For anyone who sees this, let me just mention it's episode 90. The title is Transformative Loss with Kevin White. And also let me mention, so you also wrote a book called Audacious Generosity. Why don't you just say something about that real quick?
Yeah, it's really been out of that loss, that graveyard that God has birthed for the last 20 years, my opportunity to really work in missions for the country of India. And so I've been staring at the Great Commission, if you will, and God's mission is Jesus. And through this time, I've been begging God, how will all of these people ever know you? And I can't go into all that. We don't have time. But the quick answer is audacious generosity. For God so loved that he gave.
Yeah.
So just really desiring that lifestyle, that culture to be more and more in our church, because I really believe the Great Commission can be fulfilled in our generation.
Yeah, and it's a great book. You should check it out. So episode 90, go to marcuswatson.com. You can listen to the episode there. You can subscribe on whatever podcast app you listen to. And anyway, thanks, Kevin. Good to talk to you again.
Mark.
All right, bye.